Hi, my name's Steve Reagan with CSO Online, and in studio with me is Joan Goodchild, my editor-in-chief. We still haven't figured out a name for this show yet, but we're back again to hang out with you. So today we're going to talk about some ISP changes and a little bit about the director of the FBI. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. So, Joan, how are you?
Steve, what's happening this week?
Oh, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. So, did you hear about the FBI director? He has a Twitter account now.
I was surprised, because I thought that generation was geared more towards Facebook. But yes, apparently he has a Twitter account, and somebody found it and with some very creative breadcrumbs that they followed.
I think that was the best part of the whole story. It's not that he had a Twitter account, it's just how it was found. So, for anybody who's not familiar with this situation, what happened was the director of the FBI, James Comey, had referenced his Instagram and Twitter accounts during a conversation he was having not too long ago at the Intelligence and National Security Alliance dinner. And a reporter at Fox News casually mentioned it on Twitter, and Ashley Feinberg, a reporter at Gizmodo, said challenge accepted and started digging around on the internet. Now, the funny thing about this is that there was if you looked hard enough, a trail that actually led to the FBI director's Twitter accounts. And the story of how she dug all this up is really worth a read. For those of you on YouTube, you'll actually see this in the show notes below. And if you're reading this on CSO Online, we'll have a link to the story in the article with this, but it's definitely worth your time reading. The long and short of it is she started digging around and found Comey's 22-year-old son had the largest internet presence of the whole family. And so from there, she was able to connect the son to Kenyon College. Now, checking Kenyon College led to a couple of old and deleted tweets, and it just started like this breadcrumb, just following it around through universities and things like this, to where eventually she came across enough information to add Comey on Instagram. Now, when you add somebody on Instagram, what happens is you get a recommendation of who else you should follow based on that person. And so she knew she had the right accounts because by following one person, which would have been Comey's son, on Instagram, she was able to find Comey's Instagram account because it was recommended to her. And then that led to backtracking, going back to Twitter, and that's how she found him. It's amazing, just this whole series of open source intelligence and the fact, a vivid reminder that everything you do online is always going to be there, and everything somebody else does online is there too. So if they interact with you in some way, that's a connection. And that's not something you can control.
Right.
So I noticed after this story broke, a lot of people are talking about OPSEC failures and stuff like this. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that was an OPSEC failure on his part, or do you think the bigger picture is something completely different?
Well, for starters, I don't think there was anything noteworthy happening. Was certainly not insecure that was happening with this account. You and I discussed it a little bit already too, and if he didn't want it to be known, he wouldn't have mentioned it at all in that particular interview that he was giving. So for starters, I don't think that anything huge has been revealed here. I do think that the takeaway from that story, it was interesting how she used these clues. I think a lot of us have done it. Anyone that's trying to track down and find out what happened to an ex that doesn't have a particularly big profile or presence online I've even done this myself and trying to find the difficult to obtain email, never at the level that the reporter at Gizmodo went to, but she had a really interesting strategy that she used. I think, like you said, the takeaway is if you have family and friends that are online, you're going to be found out. This is just open source intelligence that's readily available, and following a trail is going to eventually lead somebody somewhere, depending on where it is, remains to be seen depending on the individual. But I thought the biggest interesting takeaway was that he had written a thesis on Reinhold Niebuhr.
Yeah.
That's some thesis.
And oddly enough, that is exactly that thesis is what led to him on Twitter, because that was the name he used for Twitter. The Twitter account was what is it? Project Exile 7
Yep.
is the Twitter handle, but the name associated with that was the person he did his thesis on. And then another piece of passive but really hard to dispute without burning the word evidence. But really, I mean, it's a huge coincidence if this wasn't true. It's the fact that somebody who is his personal friend was the only follower on that account at the time. I mean, it's like, gee, maybe it's not you, but it's really hard to dispute all these little chains coming together.
Incredible coincidences, as I think she put it in her story.
Right. And so, like, I don't know, maybe 8 hours or so after that story broke, his Twitter account just like exploded. He started getting all kinds of followers. It went from public to private. But before it went private, or shortly after it went private, I should say, he posted up this meme that was absolutely hilarious. And it was just it's the I'm not even mad. That's amazing. Had a link to jobs at FBIjobs.gov. I thought that was hysterical. I mean, it was just like a tip of the hat to well played, because, I mean, it is what it is. Yep. There's another lesson, though, and it's kind of what I was alluding to earlier. It's amazing the amount of information that is readily available online about you or related to you that you cannot control. You know, one of the linchpins in her story and the trail that led to him was the fact that she started finding messages to his son from people who were congratulating him on his dad's promotion to head the FBI, which really gives you a clue as, either these people don't know who they're talking to,
right,
or they do know who they're talking to, and that really is his son. And then following the path from his son, it was easier to find dad that way. Well, it's not uncommon that there's a wealth of information out there about you that you don't control. And in some cases, when you're doing research on an individual, while that wasn't the case here, the amount of information that's being collected about you and sold to people that's readily available for purchase is another way to tie people down, to make these little threads visible. For $20, I can buy a full credit report on you and learn more about you and your history in 5 minutes of reading than a few hours of searching Google. Which leads me to the next thing we wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Actually,
which
hold
what?
on.
I hear you, Keith. What are you saying?
No, I just wanted to tell you a quick story based on that first topic before you get to the second topic. This is Keith Shaw.
Okay.
I'm one of the producers of this awesome show. I'm going to admit this now for the first time ever, so this is a world exclusive for you guys. So at one point, I was trying to find a friend of mine from high school. You know how you do that with the Facebook, and this guy was not on Facebook. This guy had basically lost touch with a bunch of us. There were some rumors that he was living in Florida, and so I was able to track him down through regular Google searches through just kind of the typical things that you do, either the identity search or that kind of stuff. But we still couldn't nail him down. But his wife was on Facebook, and we were able to kind of, but she wasn't going to let us in, obviously, as a friend request. So I went to classmates.com and pretended to be a classmate from her graduating class.
Oh my gosh.
And I made up a fake name, and then because I wanted to see if I could actually get more information from the classmates.com profile. The weird part about this is I still get emails from classmates.com because, again, I think I set up a secondary fake email account, but every now and then I'll go into that account just to kind of clean it up, and I get like, oh yeah, this fake persona that I did. All right, my soul is now clean. I've done this confession.
Did you ever find the guy though? Did you actually get in touch with him after duping his wife?
What we did was we got an address basically, and then we sent him a letter and said, hey, we found you. If you want to contact us, send us a note or an email or something like that. And then he never did get back to us.
Okay. So probably mad that you duped his wife.
And you still didn't get to connect with him.
I know, I still didn't make the connection, but I felt a little guilty about pretending to be someone else. By
the way, you're going to get those classmate emails from now until the end of eternity. They won't go away. You're going to be stuck with those. I just want you to know that. Where were we? We were going to talk about something.
We're talking about privacy now.
Oh, yeah. The ISP thing. So, yeah. Did you know the ISPs sell your data if they wanted to. Did you know that? Did you guys know that in the studio? Who else is in there with you, Joan?
We got Doug and we got Keith from classmates.com.
Yeah,
and,
Keith from classmates.com.
And I don't know if they knew. I did know that. I think, it's important to note going into this that what's going on really changes nothing.
Yeah, that was the big thing. So when the Senate voted to put a halt to the FCC rules, people freaked out. Like the Republicans just voted to sell your privacy to the highest bidder. And, well, yeah, technically that's true, but not really. See, what happened is what they overturned never really went into effect to begin with.
Right.
So it's a catch-22 here. So yeah, your privacy is at risk, but it was always at risk. In fact, what they overturned was designed to protect you. So you can't. It's not as if. I'm trying to think of a way to phrase this that doesn't make me sound like an arrogant burp, but it's more like they've taken away something I didn't really have to begin with.
Right.
So it's a thing to where we should be upset about this. We should definitely be concerned, but we shouldn't, run for the hills and panic, if that makes sense.
So let's dig into that a little bit more because, again, I know a lot of the privacy advocates that I follow and keep up with on social media and read their stuff are, really concerned about this and banging the drum big. So what are the implications?
So the implications are that the ISPs themselves can collect information about your browsing. They can collect information about you yourself, your habits online, and then they create a profile which can then be sold to advertisers who will then take that profile and direct targeted ads towards you while you're browsing the web. So the thing is, while that's a possibility, there's really no proof that it's been done except for the fact that targeted ads are a thing.
Yep.
But your profile from your ISP is just one piece of a large puzzle that marketing and advertising firms have about you. And they don't get that information from the ISP. 9 times out of 10, they're getting it because you gave it to them. When you fill out credit card applications, when you're shopping online, when you're, doing surveys, for those of you that do surveys, that information's collected up. It's rounded up and then sold off in pieces or sold off in chunks. The 3 credit bureaus actually do more money selling your data than they do, running credit reports and managing your credit profile. The real money there is what the credit agencies have about you that they sell off to marketing firms. So one thing a lot of you might have noticed the ISPs are doing is targeted searches. And Keith, you and I were talking about this before we started recording, so I'm going to ask you a question here in a minute. But the targeted searches are these DNS redirects. So if you mistype a URL, you get this custom search page from your ISP. That's valuable data. And there are usually ads. Sometimes there are ads on that page and everything like this. But tell me your story, Keith. Tell me about the FiOS thing you were looking at.
The good one, or the clean one, or the not so clean one?
Oh, I don't care. You could do either one. Go for it.
Well, the clean version is our VPN. If it's not connected, I get that page if I try to come to one of the network, like our content management system, and I get that Verizon page. But what I was telling you earlier was when all this news came out and people were freaking out, I had like my wife and a couple of friends were like, hey, should I get a VPN? And I realized that on my own household account that I don't know if I was opting in or opting out. And I kept looking on the Verizon FiOS homepage and all my account information of where is the link where I can choose to opt out. And for the life of me, I couldn't find it. And as I just established, I'm pretty good at searching web pages and doing things like that, but I could not find it. Now, maybe now that this bill was signed by the president, maybe they're going to do more to make that link visible, but I doubt it.
So they can make it visible. I mean, and to your point, trying to opt out of these custom searches is rightfully painful. There is, let's see, you have Comcast, Charter, Bright House, or Spectrum here in Indianapolis, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint. Think about that. Those are all these ISPs. So a lot of people who were getting panicky about this are thinking about their home ISP, like Fios or Comcast. And they forget that Verizon's an ISP and you have a cell phone. And if you're browsing the web on your cell phone, well, that's another data point that could be collected about you. So trying to opt out of this stuff is painful and almost impossible. You really have to hunt for it and search it. So what I was going to tell you, Keith, is when you bring up these custom search pages, mistype a URL, bring one up, look on the page for like, why am I seeing this? Or opt out. You'll usually see it on the results page itself. That's a good way to opt out of some data point collections the ISP have, because it'll usually lead you to that page. But if you get that up and you're not seeing it, I want you to check your ad blocker. It's entirely possible your ad blocker is preventing that from being displayed. Because I've noticed with ad block here lately, some legitimate links are being blocked because they do have advertising purposes. So it's like a catch-all filter that's blocking it. It's been a real pain for me. But your friend, go ahead.
I was going to say, so I think a lot of the reason why people were really getting upset is, this misconception that, there's sort of a readily available file of all of your dirty history that you've searched for that can be purchased and looked at and used to embarrass you. And that brings me to the dude who was trying to crowdfund the effort to buy the internet histories of Paul Ryan and everyone else that voted for this. Talk about that a little bit. Is that even really possible?
So if it is possible, I'm just going to be honest. I don't know how that would happen because, again, the stuff the ISP collects about you is just one small piece of the puzzle. It's not the whole picture. And it's not like I can call Comcast up and say, hey, I want to buy so-and-so's browsing data, please. Tell me how much I owe you. That's not how it works. That data is sold to brokers who add it to other packages of information about things, and then it's sold to other brokers who then sell it to brokers who forward it. Do you see the pattern here?
Yeah.
You have to go to data brokers, advertising agencies, marketing agencies, places like that is where this data is going. But it's not as if you're going to know whose data you're looking at. What you're going to know is in a particular region, in this particular area, a person is interested in auto sports or cars. And sometimes you can tie that to an individual, but that really depends on the type of profile you're buying, and you can't just willy-nilly buy everything. You have to really buy multiple pieces and put it all together yourself, and even then, you're not 100% guaranteed it's going to be correct, which is a problem the 3 credit agencies run into all the time. They have these great profiles on people, except they're for the wrong people. I personally have experienced this. I've had things on my credit report that were simply not me, and it took forever to prove such. That's just an easy example of some of the nightmares other people have had to deal with when it comes to data brokers and dealing with all of this massive amount of compiled information on individuals. So I really don't know how the crowdsource guy is going to be able to pull that one off. Now, GoFundMe did say they were working closely with him and they were going to make sure the money was spent appropriately and things like this. And that's kudos to them for that, because otherwise it really does seem kind of suspicious, and it does make one worry, all this money's being collected for an endeavor, but is it even possible? There was a Twitter comment by the guy who started, one of the founders of Cards Against Humanity, who actually said, avoid that type of program, and if this data is available, he's going to buy it and release it. I believe that would happen. I truly believe if there was a way to buy all this information, I could see the Cards Against Humanity people purchasing it, dumping it on the web. I could see that happening totally. So, Keith, and you and I talked about this too, Jim. Somebody asked you about VPNs. And I think that's a really valid thing that we should talk about really quickly. I've seen a lot of information out there, like if you use incognito mode in a VPN, then the ISP can't track you. I don't believe that for a second. First of all, it's your ISP. They know everything there is to know about you when it comes online. Second, if you're using a VPN, even if it's a paid VPN service, you're kind of trusting that the VPN is not collecting information about you as well. So my advice would be to use a VPN if you want, but also use like HTTPS everywhere. Make sure you're browsing on encrypted websites. That way, if you're entering information or you're doing specific functions, it makes it really hard for people to just passively see what you're doing. So to give you an example, if you go to the New York Times or you go to the Washington Post or the Wall Street Journal, your ISP is going to know that that's where you went. But they're not going to, if it's an encrypted website, they're not going to be able to see what articles you're reading in what order. They're not going to be able to see the details of any comments you're leaving behind. They're not going to be able to follow you implicitly through that website, and that's the point. But they will know that you went to the Wall Street Journal, and that in itself is enough for a marketer to know that you like to be educated on current events, you like to read the news, you're fond of the Wall Street Journal because you visited them directly, you weren't passively sent there through a link. I mean, that right there is enough information that could start to build a sketchy profile about you. And I mean sketchy not in a negative sense, sketchy as in it's just like a basic outline. It's not granular or specific. But that's data that can be sold. So the point being is there's really no way you can escape it. Now, for their part, the ISPs have all come out and said, we would never do this. We're not going to sell your browsing history. And I say, great, thank you for standing up and saying that. But in the back of my head, it's just them saying that. They have a vested interest in selling my data if it's going to make them money. And I have to take their word that they're not going to, even if I've opted out. So that was my whole argument on the ISP stuff.
Thank you, Steve.
I'm still trapped in a box, though. Will you people please let me out of here? This is getting ridiculous. Every week now, I'm trapped in this.
What website should I type in or mistype? I just got to make sure I'm not going to get not arrested, but fired from the HR department.
I feel like there's so much pressure right now.
I think I'll do Goggle.
Right, yeah,
Goggle, yeah. Just your luck, you're going to pull up sportswear.
Or something, yeah. I'll just take your word for it, Steve.
Well, I mean, you're the one that has FiOS at home, so I'm jealous, first of all.
Yeah.
And second, I mean, I don't think that trick will work if the office isn't using FiOS. Who does the ISP out there? Is that Verizon for you guys in the office? I've never actually looked.
Oh, is this going to reveal any secrets of who we're using? I think it's Verizon here. It depends on the town in Massachusetts. It's weird how the Commonwealth of Massachusetts all sets up, like each town can choose which provider they have access to. So
yeah, sometimes you have municipal cable and internet provider that the town builds. So
yeah, see that's actually really cool that you guys have that. Here in Indiana, I have a choice. I could have Bright House or nothing. That's what I have in the metro area here in Indianapolis. I don't get a choice. I mean, I could use AT&T if I were really slow DSL, but otherwise, if I want cable or broadband, I have to have Bright House. That's all I get. Massachusetts, Senator Ed Markey actually weighed in on the ISP stuff, said he's going to propose legislation that'll force the FCC to revisit the privacy issue, and he's hoping that'll take off. About 2 days after he made that statement, though, President Trump actually signed the Senate stuff into law. So it's done. He signed off on it, which is not surprising because all of his advisors were encouraging him to do that. That's all I had for this week. You guys got anything else you want to chime in with?
No, we'll be following it. We always do.
Awesome. Well, hey, everybody, thanks for hanging out with me today. I appreciate it. I hope all of you have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you soon.